Welcome back. Today we finally get to some trims and the siding. Over the next 10 minutes or so, we'll go from just the skeleton to a full skin and bones and having the building look like something a bit more useful. Let's get into it. We'll start with getting the supporting metal put in place to hold one side of the soffits. Here, I'm using a combined F trim and J channel that looks a bit like this, and its purpose is to provide a nice uniform transition between the soffit panel and the wall steel and be as easy to hang as driving a few nails in the longer flange. This could be done in a few ways with a few different types of trim, but for me, this was the best combination of looks, cost, and installation effort. The soffit panels themselves were ordered pre-cut to the depth of the overhang, and they nestle together all nice and tight. It really doesn't take long to place each panel. I simply slide in the panel, drive a small screw to support the outside edge, then place the next one. Once I find my groove, I spend almost as much time moving the platform around as I do putting the metal up. I'll continue along this east side of the building, repeating panel after panel, and then put up the L-shaped fascia before moving on to the other sides of the building. Once that is done, I'm able to wait for some reinforcement and get started on the roof. The roof was something I might have been able to do solo, but it would have been even more sketchy than placing all of the trusses and that roof framing by myself. And since Alila is an amazing example of what you get when you combine strength, determination, and willingness to learn, I'm not sure why I wouldn't accept the help when it's available. Getting the first sheet in place took some thinking. Having never lifted a panel this long, I wasn't entirely sure how much effort it would take to prevent the sheet from bending or crinkling. Turns out these sheets are rather robust, and it makes sense when I later see how much more stable the building became by installing this skin. Initially, I could feel the wobble of the building as I crawled around hoisting these things into place, but by the time the last panels were getting screwed down, wobble was nearly non-existent. There was a little bit of frustration for Alila getting acclimated to working on the ladder while trying to screw in metal fasteners, and after a few minutes, she decided to let out that frustration by taking on the lifting of the panels so that I could stay attached to the tether. One by one, the panels were leaned up, hoisted up, and partially screwed down as square as we could. As I had experienced during the roof framing, Alila also found the fear of falling took a back seat to focusing on the task at hand. And while she'll tell you that she never quite got comfortable on the ladder, we're all watching the video proof of how determination can find accomplishment where you never really expected it. On our second day of roofing, we were fortunate to have another friend swing by to offer a hand. And this is one of the rare cases where the third person adds just a ridiculous amount of efficiency. Alila was able to move the panels while two of us on the ladders could focus on fitting and fastening. Along with our lessons learned from the first side, we were able to crank this out and get onto the wall steel. Before we were able to put up the wall steel, we had to finish the rest of the house wrap. In this case, the house wrap's primary function is to be an air barrier. Because of the way the steel overlaps itself and is only held down every 2 feet or so, there is a lot of potential air infiltration. Since we do plan to insulate and heat the shop, we want to limit the air movement as much as possible, and the wrap helps with exactly that. I was able to entrust the rest of the house wrap to the extra hands, and myself moved on to bringing out the laser level to place the bottom trims. This is what will establish the straight lines that I hope people notice as they approach the building. The bottom trim goes in straight and level, followed by our wainscot panels. The wainscot panels are all pre-cut to a 36-inch height and go in just like everything else did. We place a panel, we put in some screws, we place another panel. The wainscot breaks up what would otherwise be a very monotone wall color. And for what is a trivial difference in the final building cost, the improvement in looks to have the wainscot and a second color became a must-have for us. Now from here, things get a little choppy with the video. The build took my focus away from the camera and the dying GoPro batteries. So we pick up the next day when I was returning to the roof to screw down the rest of the field of screws. A little over 1,200 screws and just about an hour of work get time-lapsed here into a few seconds. I'm glad it's done. I would not recommend all of the balancing and bending, but I'm glad it's done. Moving on to the back of the barn, more siding goes into place, one sheet at a time. The main difference here being that instead of cutting the panels as a batch, each one has a different length. However, an early decision to use a 412 pitch on the roof and a 3-foot panel width on the siding means each successive panel is different by exactly 1 foot. So once I cut the first panel, each one is easy math, even if they aren't the same. and the rest of the building is just more of this place a panel, put in some screws, and place a panel. As we get towards the end of this episode, you'll get to see how the overall look is shaping up. You'll also notice that a couple of the photos show the concrete floor already in place. This floor is a radiant heated slab and seems to kind of appeared out of nowhere. However, the next episode will take a longer look at what it took to get the floor up to the correct height, leveled, heated, and concreted. So stop back when that one drops to see how we did it all.